The first sign that balance itself was under threat came quietly, carried on a wind that smelled of rain and old stone. A wind that slid through the Pride Lands as if searching for something it had lost long ago, brushing past acacia trees, whispering through tall grass, and curling around Pride Rock with a low, uneasy sigh. Kion felt it before he heard it. A strange tightening in his chest as the roar of the elders stirred within him, not rising in strength, but shifting, unsettled, like voices arguing in the dark. He stood at the edge of Pride Rock as dawn painted the sky in pale gold, his eyes scanning the vast land below, where herds usually moved with calm purpose but now lingered, hesitant, as if waiting for permission to take their next step. Behind him, the Pride Lands were waking, yet something felt off, like a song played in the wrong key. Bunga bounded up beside him, trying to sound cheerful, but even his laugh faded too quickly. Fuli paced back and forth, her movements sharp and restless, while Besht stood firm but silent, his ears flicking at every distant sound. Ono circled above, his keen eyes searching for danger. But what troubled him most was what he could not see. When Kion called the guard together, his voice carried a calm he did not entirely feel. And as he spoke about the wind, the unease, and the roar's strange reaction, Rafiki appeared as if summoned by the words themselves, his staff tapping slowly, thoughtfully, against the ground. Rafiki spoke of balance, being like a living thing, always mobile, always adjusting, and warned that when darkness challenges the circle, it rarely does so with claws alone. As if to underline his words, thunder rumbled faintly on the horizon, though the sky above remained clear. The day passed with growing tension as reports came in from across the Pride Lands. Waterholes clouding without cause, birds refusing to land in certain areas, and shadows that stretched too far, lingering even when the sun stood high. By afternoon, Simba joined the guard, his expression heavy with memories of battles past, and he told Kion stories Mufasa once shared, of times when the greatest threats were not invaders from beyond, but fractures from within. Moments when fear and doubt weakened the circle more than any enemy could. As evening fell, the wind returned stronger, whipping dust into the air and carrying with it a low, distant sound. Not quite a roar, not quite a cry, but something in between, ancient and mournful. Kion felt the roar respond again, a pull that made his paws dig into the earth, as if the land itself were asking him to listen. Then the storm came without warning, dark clouds rolling in fast, lightning tearing across the sky and illuminating the savanna in sharp flashes of white. In that light, shapes appeared at the far edges of the plains, lion-like silhouettes that flickered and vanished, leaving scorched ground where they stood. The guard moved quickly, helping animals reach safety as rain poured down and thunder shook the earth. But no matter how fast they were, the sense of being watched never faded. That night, Kion dreamed of the circle of life glowing beneath his paws, cracked by shadows that crept inward from all sides. And when he woke, the echo of a distant roar lingered in his ears. The next morning brought no peace, only more signs that the darkness was testing the land's resolve. Elders gathered, voices rose in worried debate, and for the first time in many seasons, unity felt fragile, stretched thin by fear of the unknown. Kion listened, torn between the weight of leadership and the pull of his own doubts, knowing that if balance was to be protected, he would have to face not just an enemy, but the questions growing inside him. As another storm brewed on the horizon, thunder rolling like a warning drum, Kion stepped forward and promised the Pride Lands that the Lion Guard would stand firm, no matter how deep the shadows grew. Far beyond the savanna, unseen forces stirred, and a quiet, knowing presence watched the land with interest as the war for balance began to take its first, silent steps. The storm did not pass with the night, and when morning came, it arrived wrapped in thick gray clouds that pressed low over the Pride Lands, muting colors and sounds until even the birds seemed unsure whether to sing. Kion stood at the edge of the plains again, watching rainwater gather in shallow streams that ran where none had flowed before, carving thin lines through the earth as if the land itself were being rewritten. The roar of the elders stirred uneasily inside him, not demanding release, but tugging, pulling his thoughts in opposite directions, as though the voices within it could not agree on what must be done. Behind him, The Lion Guard gathered quietly, each feeling the weight of the moment in their own way. Fuli's eyes followed every flicker of movement across the grass, her muscles tense, ready to sprint at the first sign of danger. Bunga tried to crack a joke, but the sound of his own voice seemed too loud in the damp air, and he quickly fell silent, glancing at Kion with concern. Besh shifted his massive weight, leaving deep prints in the soft ground, his calm presence steadying, even as his gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Ono circled lower than usual, wings slicing through mist as he searched for anything that might explain the growing unease. Yet what troubled him most was the way the clouds themselves seemed to watch him, rolling and reshaping as if alive. Rafiki appeared again, staff tapping with deliberate rhythm, and spoke of storms that come not to destroy, but to reveal what lies beneath, warning that balance often demands difficult choices before it can be restored. As if answering him, a sharp crack of thunder split the sky, and in its echo came a sound that made every lion in the Pride Lands lift their head at once. A roar, distant, yet unmistakable, layered with many voices, some proud, some angry, some filled with sorrow. Simba's ears flattened as recognition flickered across his face, and he told Kion that the sound reminded him of old tales Mufasa once spoke of. Legends of ancient guardians who believed balance could only be preserved through control, not harmony. The guard was dispatched quickly, splitting up to investigate reports of unrest spreading like ripples across the land. At a nearby gorge, Fuli found antelope refusing to cross, their eyes wide with fear as shadows moved beneath the surface of the water. At the riverbanks, Besh discovered fish swimming in frantic circles, the current shifting against its natural flow. Ono spotted patterns forming in the clouds, shapes that mirrored the ancient symbols of the circle of life, now twisted and incomplete. When the guard regrouped, their findings painted a troubling picture, one of a lamp being pushed, tested, nudged toward imbalance by an unseen hand. As night approached once more, the wind returned stronger than before, howling through the grass and carrying with it whispers that made even the bravest shiver. Kion felt a sudden surge within him, the roar pressing closer to the surface, and for a moment he feared it might burst free without his command. He focused, remembering Simba's lessons, Mufasa's wisdom passed down through stories and starlight, and steadied himself, refusing to let fear decide for him. That was when they appeared again, closer this time, dark lion-like figures emerging from the storm itself, their forms shimmering with energy that crackled like lightning along their outlines. They did not attack, did not roar, but their presence alone sent a wave of panic through nearby herds. Kion stepped forward, placing himself between the shadows and the animals behind him, his voice strong as he demanded to know who they were and why they challenged the circle of life. The figures paused, and from them came a voice that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once, speaking of balance lost, of leaders who had grown weak, of a circle that no longer held. The words struck deep, stirring doubt and anger in equal measure, and Kion felt the roar react sharply, as if offended by the accusation. Lightning flashed, and in that brief instant, the figures vanished, leaving behind scorched symbols burned into the earth, marks that Rafiki later identified as ancient signs of judgment. The Pride Lands buzzed with fear that night, whispers spreading faster than the wind, and arguments broke out among the animals, some questioning whether the Lion Guard could truly protect them, others insisting unity was their only hope. Simba called Kion aside, speaking softly of leadership, of moments when even kings must listen as much as they lead, and reminded his son that balance begins in the heart before it can be defended in the land. Alone once more, Kion gazed up at the stormlit sky, feeling the pull of destiny tighten around him, knowing that the darkness was no longer content to watch from the edges. Somewhere beyond the clouds, ancient forces gathered their strength, preparing to test the circle of life in ways the Pride Lands had not faced in generations. And as thunder rolled once more, Kion understood that the war for balance had moved from whispers to open challenge. The storm reached its fiercest point on the third night, when the sky turned nearly black and lightning tore across it in jagged lines that lit the Pride Lands like broken flashes of memory. Rain fell hard, drumming against stone and soil, and the wind howled with a voice that sounded almost angry, as if the land itself were demanding answers. Kion stood with the Lion Guard near the heart of the savannah, every sense alert. The roar of the elders coiled tightly within him, ready yet restrained by his will. Around them, animals had gathered in clusters, seeking comfort in numbers. Eyes wide as thunder shook the ground beneath their paws, Rafiki moved among them, offering calm words and steady presence, reminding everyone that even the fiercest storm must pass, though his own gaze kept lifting toward the darkened sky. Suddenly, the ground vibrated with a deep, resonant hum, stronger than before, and from the shadows beyond the rain, the ancient figures emerged once more, clearer now, their forms solid enough to cast long, trembling silhouettes across the wet earth. Lightning revealed their faces, lion-like yet marked by symbols of old authority, eyes glowing with a cold conviction that sent a chill through even the bravest hearts. They spoke again, their voices layered and powerful, declaring that balance had been broken by doubt, that leaders who hesitated invited chaos, and that the circle of life required firm control to survive. Murmurs rippled through the gathered animals, fear and uncertainty stirring like sparks ready to catch. Kion felt the weight of their words press against him, tempting him to answer force with force, to unleash the roar and drive the shadows away. For a moment, anger flared, fueled by the accusations and the fear around him. But then he remembered Simba's quiet guidance, Rafiki's wisdom, and the countless lives depending on his choices. He stepped forward, rain soaking his fur, and spoke not with a roar, but with a steady voice that carried across the storm, declaring that balance was not about domination, but understanding, not about silencing voices, but listening to them. The ancient figures hesitated, their glow flickering as if unsure, and the storm itself seemed to pause, thunder holding its breath. Kion felt the roar respond differently now, not surging outward in raw power, but resonating deeply, harmonizing with the land beneath his paws. He released it then, not as a weapon, but as a call, a sound that rolled across the Pride Lands like a wave of warmth and light, cutting through rain and shadow alike. The roar carried images of unity, of prey and predator moving in balance, of generations past guiding without controlling, and as it spread, the ancient figures began to fade, their forms dissolving into the storm that had birthed them. Lightning soft into distant flickers, thunder retreated, and the rain eased into a gentle fall that washed the scorched symbols from the earth. Silence followed, deep and profound, broken only by the steady breathing of the land as if it were finally able to rest. One by one, the animals lifted their heads, fear giving way to cautious hope, and Rafiki smiled softly, tapping his staff as he nodded in approval. Simba stepped forward, pride shining in his eyes, and placed his head gently against Kion, a silent acknowledgement of the path his son had chosen. As dawn broke, pale light spilling over the Pride Lands, the storm clouds drifted away, revealing a sky washed clean and bright. The land looked different, not scarred, but renewed, as if the trial had strengthened its roots. Kion gazed across the savannah, feeling the roar settle peacefully within him, knowing that balance had been challenged and defended not through force, but through courage and wisdom. The lion guards stood together, tired yet united, aware that darkness might one day test the circle again, but confident now in their purpose. As the sun climbed higher, life resumed its gentle rhythm, herds moving, birds singing, water flowing clear once more, and the Pride Lands breathed in harmony again, carrying forward the lesson that true balance is protected not by fear, but by understanding, and that even in the darkest storms, the circle of life endures when hearts stand together. The calm that followed the storm did not arrive all at once, but slowly, like a careful promise being kept step by step. Morning light spread across the Pride Lands, touching wet grass and stone, and steam rose softly from the earth as if the land itself were sighing after a long night. Animals emerged cautiously from their shelters, eyes scanning the horizon, ears listening for any sign that the darkness might return. Kion stood quietly, watching them, feeling the roar rest deep within him, steady and warm, yet changed. It no longer felt like a force waiting to be unleashed, but like a voice reminding him to stay aware. Rafiki approached, leaning on his staff, and spoke gently about storms that leave lessons behind, explaining that balance is not something won once and forgotten, but something guarded every day through choices, patience, and trust. As the Lion Guard walked the plains, They noticed subtle changes. Places where grass grew thicker, where water flowed clearer, where animals lingered together longer than before, as if the land remembered the unity that had saved it. Yet beneath that peace, Kion sensed something unresolved, a faint echo in the distance. Not threatening, but thoughtful. Like an unanswered question. That afternoon, Ono spotted something unusual near the border, a faint glow beneath the soil that pulsed gently, no longer dark or sharp, but calm, almost curious. When the guard approached, they found the remnants of the ancient symbols, now softened, reshaped into patterns that mirrored the circle of life, whole and unbroken. Rafiki smiled knowingly, explaining that even old forces can learn, and that not every challenge ends with defeat. Some end with understanding. Simber joined them, speaking of Mufasa, of how true kingship meant allowing the future to grow beyond the past. And Kion realized then that the war for balance had not been about winning against an enemy, but about proving that harmony could endure even when tested by fear and doubt. As the sun set, painting the sky in warm colors, the Pride Lands felt alive in a new way. Stronger not because danger was gone, but because it had been faced together. Kion lifted his gaze to the stars, beginning to appear, feeling the presence of the great kings watching, not judging, but guiding. And he understood that the circle of life was not a perfect circle drawn once, but a living path shaped by every generation. With his friends beside him and the land at peace, Kion knew that whatever whispers the future carried, the Pride Lands would meet them with courage, unity, and balance, ready to protect the harmony that made them whole.